Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim. Dear 11th graders, today we are going to discuss Unit 10, Period 3, Passive Voice versus Active Voice. Let's start. Bismillah. If we look at the first example here, people grow olive trees in Palestine. Let's look at the sentence again. The word people is actually the subject, grow, the verb, olive trees is the object. This is the construction of the active voice. We are used to this structure. We can notice that it's people who grow olive trees. The subject is the same as the person who does the action, and the object is the thing that receives the action. Let's move to another example here. The same meaning actually. Olive trees are grown in Palestine. What we can notice here is the subject is olive trees, are grown is the verb, then we have the complement. This is the other example of passive voice. The main thing to pay attention to is to ask ourselves about the subject. Is it the subject the same as the previous sentence, the one or the thing who does the action? The answer is actually no. People grow olive trees. In other words, the subject in this sentence receives the action rather than does the action. And this is actually the main meaning of passive voice. Let's explain one more other example. The professor teaches the students. The professor is the subject who does the action of teaching. And if we move to the object, the students, it is the ones who are receiving the action of teaching. In other words, in active sentences, the thing doing the action is the subject of the sentence, and the thing receiving the action is the object. Most sentences are actually active, and we are very used to hearing active voice sentences. Let's move to the other thing here with passive voice, the same sentence, but in passive voice. We'll notice that the students, which was the object in the previous sentence, is now the subject. We said before, students are the ones who are receiving the action of teaching. And one more thing to notice concerning the verb also, we added one more item, that is the form of the verb to be, and the main verb is changed into the past participle. And the agent, the one who does the action, is added after the word by at the end of the sentence. We can notice, as it is stated here, the agent is optionally included in the end of the sentence. We'll discuss that later on. When do we actually include the agent? It is when it is some important part of the sentence, when it is important to be known. To sum up what we have been saying, there are two voices in English, the active and the passive voice. The active tells us what the people or the things do. For example, the secretary wrote a letter. It is the secretary, the subject, who wrote the letter. The secretary, the subject, the secretary is the agent. But in the passive, tells us what is done to the subject. The letter was written by the secretary. That's all concerning the subject. Now we are going to move to another part of the sentence, which is the verb. The passive verb is made with the verb to be and the past participle. So the main verb should always be in the past participle, preceded by a suitable form of the verb to be. This is enough for us to do the activity in the book, actually, to be able to choose between the active voice and the passive voice in the sentences. For example, in 1948, the country became or was become a republic. In other words, we are asked to choose between the active voice and the passive voice. We should ask ourselves only one question here. The country is the subject. It is the one or the thing who receives the action or does the action. We'll find out that is the country which became. It is the one who does the action, not the one who receives the action. Let's contrast it with the next sentence. A lot of money has been spent on improving the service. Does money spend? Actually, people spend money. So money receives the action. This is why we use the passive voice in this sentence. To sum up in Arabic what I have been saying, الفرق الأساسي بين الأكتيف فويس والباسيف فويس في موضوع السبجكت. بالأكتيف فويس بتكون هي الفاعل نفسه السبجكت اللي قام بالفعل، بينما في الباسيف فويس بيكون اللي تلقى الفعل، اللي وقع عليه الفعل. Now I leave the other sentences for you for more practice. Let's move to one more thing here. Here we are going to talk about the main English tenses used in the passive voice, how to construct the passive. First of all, we need to check if the sentence contains an object or not. Remember, we have transitive verbs that must be followed by an object and other verbs that are intransitive. This is something that we discussed before, maybe in grade 10. Anyway, here we are concerned about transitive verbs that are followed by an object, like the first sentence here. John ate an apple. Passive is possible here, so we can change it to passive. Let's move now to step 2. Let's move to step 2 here. We move the object to the front of the sentence, put the original subject in a by phrase. The object apple comes to the beginning to be the subject, the verb, and John by John at the end of the sentence. Finished with the subject. Now what about the verb? The verb, as we said before, we use the suitable form of the verb to be, and the main verb has to be changed to eaten. That is verb 3, by John. Here it's important because it's a name. It's important to mention it. Put the be in the same tense as the original active sentence. So one remaining part to think always about: which form of the verb to be do we use? We have to look at the main verb of the original sentence. If we look at the main verb here, we'll notice that the main verb is ate. In other words, past simple. What is the past simple of the verb to be? It is was or were. With apple, singular, we use was. Notice the last notice here. Make the first verb agree with the new subject. This is what I meant here. Because it's an apple, we have chosen was and not were. One more example here. Changing from active to passive. The Egyptians built the pyramids. The pyramids, the object, becomes the subject of our new sentence. Now, built, a verb in the past simple. It has to be, here actually past, verb 2 and verb 3 are the same, built. And then we choose the suitable form of the verb to be, we use were. And then we write the Egyptians here. It's important to mention who built the pyramids. Now we are going to move to this table in which I tried to summarize all about the tenses and the constructions of the different tenses in English. It's good here also for us to revise the different uses of tenses in English, but briefly and quickly. With the present simple, the first sentence, people speak English in many countries. English is spoken in many countries. This is the construction for the passive voice when the sentence is in the present simple. The first step, as we agreed before, English, the object of the first sentence, becomes the subject. Then we look at the verb here. The verb is speak. Speak, present simple. So we have to ask ourselves either is or am. With English, we use is, spoken, as we agreed before, verb 3. Now, we don't have to mention who speaks English. It's normal that people are the ones who speak English. So we do not need to include the agent. With past simple, actually, somehow this is very close. Again, the school bought 20 computers last year. 20 computers were bought by the school last year. 20 computers. One who receives the action, it was the object. We have to change it to become to the beginning of the sentence because it is not the subject. The verb is bought. Especially the presence of the word last year reminds us of the suitable tense to be used here, an action finished in the past. Bought, the past participle. We have to ask ourselves, what about the verb, the suitable form of the verb to be, I mean. Was or where are the suitable ones to choose from for the past simple. With computers, where is the suitable verb to be chosen? Let's move to the third one. Present continuous, right now. Remember that once we are talking about an action in progress, now the suitable tense to be used is a present continuous. Right now, Sarah is writing a letter. Right now, with parts like this, something that decides the time, or once we start with something different from the subject or anything which is not the subject, simply we copy it. It's not difficult to recognize that because usually that part is split from the sentence by using a comma. We copy it and that's all. So we start from the subject. Sarah is writing a letter. A letter is the thing that receives the action. It becomes the subject. A letter is being written. Again, writing changes to the verb 3, written. And we use being because it shows the progress of the action. So the suitable form with the present continuous in the passive voice is are, am, being with the past participle. Past continuous, the salesman was helping the customer when the light went off. The customer was being helped when the light went off. The customer, the object, the one who receives help from the salesman, now it is the subject, was being helped. Notice was is there, is already there in the sentence, but we need always to think about agreement. So here, because it's a customer, one customer, we use was. But if customers, we use were. And being should be also there. Present perfect, they have already discussed the book. The book has already been discussed. With the present perfect, remember the main structure or the original structure of the present perfect, has or have followed by the past participle. This is somehow is easier for us because the past participle is already there included in the sentence. The book at the beginning of the sentence, the subject, have discussed in the active voice, and the passive voice, it should be changed into either have or has been with the past participle. Since it is the book, singular, the suitable form here is actually has. With words like already or those or just, or once you find words like this between the two parts of the sentence, simply you copy, the two parts of the verb, we copy them as they are. This is why we say has already been discussed. Past perfect, she had posted the emails by 2 p.m. yesterday. The emails had been posted. The emails becomes the subject, had been posted. Again, had, actually this helps us with the agreement. It is always had whether the subject is singular or a plural. The suitable form of the verb after had, after has, after have, past participle, and the past participle form of the verbs to be is been. So again, had, been, posted. Simple future with will. The company will hire more workers. More workers will be hired by the company. More workers will, and then we choose the suitable form of the verb to be. Will and all other models are always followed by the infinitive form of the verb. So, what is the suitable form of the verb to be used here? It is actually be. Again, with a quick look at all these sentences, we can notice that the main verb in the passive constructions is always verb 3, preceded by what comes before it is a verb to be. We choose the verb to be depending on the original tense of the sentence, which is decided by the verb. This is why in present simple is, are, am. And we choose the matter of number, singular, plural, depending on the subject. Past simple was or were. With the continuous, we add being before the verb in the main verb, which is in the past participle. And here with been, we added after has, have, or had, and before the past participle. With will and all other models, actually we use be, and then we use the past participle form of the verb. As if the verb be takes the tense or the form of the main verb of the sentence and makes the main verb step back, one step, go back, and become the past participle. Let's move here to do more examples. Miss Archer's Ruby rang, and the verb which is put here in brackets is steal from her house last night. With a sentence like this, the suitable voice to be used is actually the passive voice, because the ring does not steal. It cannot, it is actually the thing that receives the action of the stealing. And let's ask ourselves here, what about the tense? What is the suitable tense here? With last night, the suitable tense is past simple. So we choose between either was, were, and then we change this verb steal to be the past participle, that is stolen. This is why we say Miss Archer's ruby ring was stolen from her house last night. One more example, Rolls-Royce cars make in England. Let's ask ourselves first about the tense. What do you think is the suitable tense for this sentence? We are talking about cars. Were made, are now made, in the future they may be made. So something like, which is repeated. And this is why it's suitable to use present simple. And here we use are made. One final thing to point to is this. Why do we use passive sentences? We use passive voice when the receiver of the action is more important in our communication than the one who did it or the agent. For example, Harvard University was founded in 1636. The main focus of the sentence is Harvard University and establishing Harvard University, not who established it. If we move to the second sentence, we use the passive voice when we don't know who did the action. For example, the bank was robbed yesterday. Robbed يعني stolen, سرقة. We are unlikely to know who stole the bank or who robbed the bank. And the main thing is the robbery, stealing the money from the bank. We use the passive also when we don't need to say who did the action. The bill was signed into law at noon. Again here, we don't need to know who did the action. It's known that governments or people in government are the ones who sign the law. Politicians, people whose job is to do this. And so we don't need to mention that. Maybe something like also growing. Once we say in the first sentence at the beginning, olive trees are grown in Palestine, it's understood, it's known that they are the farmers, the ones who do the action. We can also use passive to avoid saying who did the action, sometimes for, let me say, to avoid embarrassing situations. Like if we wanted to report something which is somehow not good in news, for example, telling your mother that the vase was broken, you avoid saying my brother broke the vase, the vase or maybe the glass or whatsoever. You might say the vase was broken, one simple example for that. And that can help us do the activity in our box here. Complete the sentences using the passive form of the verb in brackets in the correct tense. Actually, here we have to ask ourselves more than one question. First of all, once we read the first sentence, we have to decide the tense, then apply what we have been saying before. My car at the moment, so I have to go to work by bus. Which tense is the suitable tense? What is the time of the action? At the moment, at the time of speaking, means the action is in progress now, continuous now, present continuous. Remember what we said before? Once you do this, you can go back or to the table before and you can remember that we need here to use is or are, being, and the past participle form of the verb. My car, singular, is being repaired at the moment. So I have to go to work by bus. We copy the complement of the sentence. Now I leave the other sentences for you to watch the video more than once, write down your own notes, and then do the rest of them. Thanks for